Early months postpartum offer an important opportunity for a new family to connect and bond and adapt to life with their newborn. These initial months are impressionable like wet concrete, shaping your baby's introduction of life outside of the womb. So, the experiences that take place in these early weeks and months set the tone for your baby's development and well being, laying the foundation for healthy sleep habits, healthy feeding, and connection. These first months are sacred and sensitive. They are best supported by maintaining a calm and nurturing environment, responding to your baby's cues, and creating routines that honor both their needs and yours. This is one of the reasons why I encourage families to rest as much as possible after birth and make the journey back into the swing of things as slow and drawn out as possible. We live in a hyperproductive environment where many of us draw our worth from our productivity. Guilty. In addition to that, many people believe that it's normal or even expected to get back into life quickly after having a baby. This is a product of a capitalist culture that lacks traditions to support families after giving birth. With the rise of a profit oriented and male dominated movement in the early 1900s, cultural wisdom passed down through generations of midwives and birth workers supporting postpartum bonding, rest, and newborn care were nearly eradicated, and bouncing back became the norm. But let me ask you this. Does it feel good and healthy to bounce back into the swing of life after having a baby when you're getting less sleep and recovering from birth and taking care of a new person? Your hands are full and your body just went through so much. Most other cultures around the world practice ancient traditions surrounding postpartum and newborn care that involve keeping the mother or birth parent and the baby warm, feeding them warm, nourishing foods, and resting in bed skin to skin with the baby for 4 to 6 weeks. It is said that the first 40 days of a postpartum mother affect the health for the next 40 years. So it is a huge investment in your long-term health as well as your baby's well-being for you to be regulated, nourished, and well taken care of in those first months postpartum. It's a huge investment in your marriage, in your long-term health and wellness. This matters. This is a time where the nervous system is impressionable and the body is very open, which means it's susceptible to cold and illness. This pause on all other duties of life outside of recovering and taking care of your baby allows you and your baby to connect. It nurtures your intuition, your knowing of your baby and their behavior, and it allows both your instincts and genetic expectations to kick in and be fulfilled. So, if you've come across the continuum concept by Jean Leadoff, you might already be familiar with the idea that babies come into the world with a set of genetic expectations. These expectations, formed over thousands of years of evolution, are best met when we allow parents and babies to express their natural instincts. Some of these expectations include closeness with the one who birthed them, warmth, exposure to familiar sounds, and access to nutrition. And when these expectations of the newborn are realized, they're better able to adjust to life outside the womb and fulfill all of our expectations of them, like feeding and signaling their needs correctly. And of course, sleeping better. One example of this is known as baby-initiated feeding, which led to baby One example of this is known as baby-initiated feeding, which can lead to baby-led feeding or on-demand feeding. So just like any other mammal in the wild, when a baby is given time, they will naturally begin to search for the nipple all on their own and will often find it on their own. When placed on the birth parent's belly or chest, the baby will naturally begin that army crawl and like bobbing their head around, searching for the nipple when they're ready. It's easy to view a baby as a weak, helpless little creature whom we must do everything for. But the truth is that all babies are born with potent instincts, cultivated over thousands of years of evolution that are supportive to their survival. All wild animals are able to nurse on their own without anyone stepping in to help them. If human babies weren't able to nurse without the expertise of healthcare providers stepping in every time, how on earth would we have survived? Nature has created a fabulous system that increases the likelihood of survival when given the opportunity to be expressed. A common misconception I see in the US is that the baby must be nursing within minutes after birth. I remember showing my grandfather the postpartum part of my birth video, and the baby was just on my chest. He was like a couple minutes old, and my grandfather was like, "Why isn't he nursing? What's wrong?" And I was like, "Calm down." It's normal. It's perfectly normal for the baby to wait 30 minutes or even an hour before they nurse. When the opportunity for immediate skin to skin contact and baby initiated feeding is interrupted due to separation of the baby or an attempt to force the baby to feed immediately after birth, the baby may develop challenges with feeding. All too often, I hear stories of care providers or doulas attempting to force the baby to nurse immediately after birth and then diagnosing them with nursing difficulties when their attempts do not succeed. And from the baby's perspective, perhaps they're experiencing immediate pressure and stress to perform a new function before they're ready. Nursing difficulties are a reality for many people, but in some cases, the failure may be on the support team. Unnecessary difficulties often occur when we disrupt the normal physiologic container of birth and postpartum that take away a newborn's opportunity to fulfill their expectations and express their instincts. Then, parents are coached to wake the baby every 2 hours throughout the night to nurse. Can you imagine having to set a timer and wake up every 2 hours? Routine feeding is necessary for certain circumstances, but it does not make sense biologically for everyone to do it. Babies have brown fat that they burn during the first long sleep window after birth to allow them to rest and recover from the birth process. It is normal for a healthy baby to sleep longer than 3 hours in the first sleep window after birth, and waking the baby to feed interrupts nature's design and inhibits you from getting the longer stretch of sleep after birth that you need. Continuing this practice interrupts your baby's natural sleep cycle, which has the potential to form unfavorable sleep habits long term. Of course, there is a time and place for interference. For example, when a baby is born with low blood sugar, they may have low energy after birth. Low blood sugar can be life threatening, and in circumstances where the baby has low blood sugar, it's best to support the baby in feeding sooner rather than later. And if needed, the baby can receive a supplement of hand expressed colostrum or a donated colostrum or formula if needed. Babies born with low blood sugar are commonly seen when the parent has gestational diabetes or low blood sugar in labor. Another reason why starting or continuing with scheduled feeding may be necessary is if the baby has jaundice, which is the red blood cells are breaking down naturally after birth, causing a yellowing of the skin. Taking in liquids frequently helps the baby flush the old red blood cells out of their system, and we'll talk about that more in the jaundice section later on. So, how does that relate to sleeping? All too often, I see families carry unrealistic expectations of their newborn, thinking they have to be able to regulate their developing nervous system independently, that less touch and comfort is better, and they should be able to sleep on their own from the get go. Western culture is hyper independent and glorifies separation as the ultimate goal to achieve. Some people believe that babies can manipulate parents and they'll become spoiled if they're held or soothed too much. This couldn't be more far from the truth. The part of your baby's brain that would allow them to manipulate someone hasn't even been developed yet. In a culture where parents feel pressure to ignore their instincts, whether to sleep train too early or strictly adhere to feeding schedules that interrupt the parent's sleep unnecessarily, or avoid holding their baby too much, can lead to unnecessary stress for both the parent and the baby. in an instinct intact environment, one that allows both the baby and the caregiver to express their instincts. The dynamic of the baby and the parent is often more in sync and aligned with the baby's developmental needs. For example, the simple act of responding to your baby's needs, whether for food or comfort, teaches them that their world is safe.